The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to recognize the exemplary programs for senior citizens offered by the Village of Rye Brook. Based at the Basilopost Center on Garibaldi Place, the Rye Brook seniors enjoy a wide and varied program that involves luncheons for nutritious purposes and companionship, with a host of different programs, arts and crafts, games, special trips, and a schedule of special events for holidays like Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, and Easter. The senior coordinator, who also serves as the deputy village clerk, Liz Rotfeld, is ably assisted by Angie Storino. Free transportation is provided for seniors who no longer are able to drive and so still want to attend these events. And these programs have garnered support all across the village government by Mayor Jason Klein and the village board and the outstanding village administrator, Chris Bradbury, in assistance of this community. From the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, we salute the Rye Brook Seniors Program and the Village of Rye Brook for their service to the senior residents of their community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor and remember the life of former New Jersey Assemblyman and pillar of the New Jersey community, Alberto Catino, better known as Al Catino. Born in my hometown of Newark, Mr. Catino was first elected as the 29th District Assemblyman in 1997 at 27 years old. He was young, but he was already a central figure of New Jersey's Portuguese community. He did so much good for so many, a public servant who fought for prison reentry reforms, job creation, and expanding our parks. Too many, he is remembered as a key organizer of the Portugal Day Festival. When he wasn't serving the city in his legislative capacity, he was serving his community as a local soccer team coach. His love for the game also motivated his role as chairman and co-founder of the Ironbound Soccer Club, which is one of the many initiatives he led to promote amateur and semi-professional soccer so our kids could grow in team building and work ethic. I was heartbroken to hear of his passing in a car accident last month. My community was heartbroken too. I'm praying for the Catino family and that our community carries his legacy by leading with passion and heart. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
For 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to object as our House returns after an unconstitutional 2-week forced recess. Rather than exercise his constitutional Article 1 duties, Speaker Johnson fell in step with warmongering hotheads in the executive branch. He failed to honor his constitutional oath and uphold the U.S. Constitution and Congress's defined powers in Article 1. He gavelled the House out at a most profound moment in world and American history. The U.S. Constitution is clear. Article 1, Section 8 says the Congress shall have the power to declare war. It does not say may have power. It says Congress shall have power. Speaker Johnson ignored this provision. Speaker Johnson also has allowed the executive branch to draw down billions upon billions of taxpayer dollars without consent of Congress. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 states, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Without a vote by Congress to authorize the war and appropriations spent, the Speaker is in violation of the Constitution to which he swore an oath. Mr. Speaker, what the American people are witnessing is unconstitutional and unprecedented in the history of our nation. I object, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
honor the life and the legacy and the beauty of Anita Martinez, a trailblazer whose leadership and dedication transformed the Dallas community and inspired Mexican American for generations. Born in 1925 and raised in Little Mexico, Anita Martinez demonstrated a passion for service from a very early age, led grassroots efforts in her community as a teenager, and over the course of more than 6 decades, she remained committed to uplifting others and strengthening her community. She founded the Anita N. Martinez Ballet Folclorio to instill pride and confidence in Hispanic youth through cultural education and the performing arts. Through this work, she empowered generations to embrace their heritage and pursue educational success, earning recognition at every level. In 1969, Ms. Martinez made history as the first Hispanic elected to the Dallas City Council and the first Hispanic woman elected to a city council in any major U.S. city. Her leadership brought meaningful change to underserved communities and advanced equity across Dallas. Today, I ask my colleagues to join me in recognizing Ms. Anita Nanez Martinez for her extraordinary contributions, her legacy of leadership, cultural pride, and everything that she has done to inspire all of us. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the energy was extremely high at the annual U.S. Coast Guard Marathon with around 2,000 dedicated runners and cheer athletes in Elizabeth City. The streets were filled with excitement and determination. It was an honor to celebrate the vital bond between the U.S. Coast Guard and the Elizabeth City community, recognizing the sacrifices of our active duty personnel, resilient civilians, dedicated volunteers, and the incredible Coast Guard Foundation. Before ringing the bell, we paid special tribute to the selfless service of individuals like Petty Officer Tyler Jaggers, who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I extend my deepest gratitude to the Commandant for ensuring this year's marathon took place. It was so uplifting, provided everyone in the community with the boost we all needed, and strengthened our sense of unity. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the newest addition to Team AMO, Faye Elliott Sidaro. Faye was born on May 13th and is a congressional baby through and through. She was welcomed by her parents, Dylan and Paige. Dylan serves as my chief of staff, and Paige serves as ranking member Bobby Scott's legislative director. Least to say, we anticipate she will soon surpass us all in knowledge of how Congress works. Faye is named after her great-grandmother and her great-grandfather. She's keeping her parents busy, and we can't wait for her to make an appearance on the House floor. Congratulations, Dylan and Paige, and welcome to Team AMO, Faye. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2025, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Fields, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the minority leader.
Let me first thank the Speaker for allowing the Congressional Black Caucus to use this first hour of special order to commemorate the life and legacy of my mentor, my leader, and my friend, the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, Sr. I was a student with humble beginnings, 9 siblings. My dad passed when I was 5 years old, so I was raised by a single parent. Given my circumstances, I was a young man caught between hope and expectations. I had hoped to do a lot of things, but my expectations were not high. I first had a chance to hear Reverend Jackson speak in 1978, some 48 years ago. I was a sophomore at McKinley Senior High School. All the kids in East Baton Rouge Parish was shuttled by bus to the Baton Rouge River Center to hear Reverend Jesse Jackson. After listening to Reverend Jackson, his I Am Somebody speech, I connected the reality that I really was somebody. I didn't just have to hope to be, I could expect to be. Reverend Jackson's impact on my life at that time gave me hope and the audacity to believe. I believed that I was somebody. He made me dream beyond my circumstances. He changed what I thought and what was possible. And it was at that time that I came out of my shell. The next year, I became president of the Key Club and then vice president of my senior class, all because of the I Am Somebody speech that impacted my life. After my time at McKinley, I went on to attend Southern University, where I continued to chase dreams. I went on to become the freshman class president and then student body president in 1984, all because of the impact of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. 42 years ago, my student body vice president, Michael Hurst, he was from Chicago. One day he called me and he said, "The Reverend Jesse Jackson is coming to town. Would you like me to introduce you to him?" Obviously, I said, yes, of course. Meeting a man who had made such an impression on me as a kid was extremely important. This was the same man that I saw speak as a 10th grader who inspired me to believe that I was somebody. Now I had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him one-on-one. That's when he made me his college coordinator in 1984 for his presidential campaign. And I remember we were traveling the country. We were in Michigan, registering people to vote. And I got discouraged. And I said to Reverend Jackson, "These voters are just apathetic." And he said, "Cleo, there is no such thing as an apathetic voter. They're only uninspired. And it is our job to inspire every last one of them." And that showed me that he wanted to see the best in everybody. And I chose to follow him because he was a light of hope. And when I first thought about running for public office, the first political figure I talked to was Reverend Jesse Jackson. I know, a lot of folk in Baton Rouge, but I wanted to talk to someone about the idea of a 24-year-old running for the Louisiana State Senate. And I called Reverend Jackson. And I thought the answer would have been, start at city council or start at the school board. No, Jesse Jackson said, if you don't run, you can't win. And I did. Reverend Jackson ran for president again in 1988, 38 years ago. He called me and he told me, "I want you to serve as a youth coordinator for my 1988 campaign." I was traveling the country with him, campaigning for him. "Keep hope alive" was our slogan. Right before the Democratic National Convention, out of the blue, I got a call from his campaign manager, Ron Brown. He called me and said, "Reverend Jackson wants you to speak on no first use of nuclear weapons at the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta." He put me on a national stage, a very, very young man. And as a young elected official, I believed in him. And in 1993, 33 years ago, I was elected to Congress. I was just 29 years of age. And once again, Reverend Jackson was there, supporting me every single step of the way, encouraging me, making me believe that I was capable. And it wasn't just me. He inspired young leaders across America. As a result of his 1984 race and 88 race for president, he inspired all of us specifically a group of young leaders right here in this Congress. I remember it. In 1994, Patrick Kennedy, at age 27, was elected to this Congress. I also had the distinct opportunity to serve with his own son, Jesse Jackson Jr., only 30 years old in 1995, had a chance to serve with him. And don't forget, in 1996, a gentleman by the name of Harold Washington Jr. was elected to this body, all inspired by Reverend Jesse Jackson. Upon being re-elected to Congress in 2025, I have had the opportunity to serve with one other Jackson, and that is Reverend Jackson's son as well, and that is Jonathan Jackson. Jesse Jackson has inspired us all. Every time I ran for office, Reverend Jackson was there. Every office I've ever been elected to, he was there to support me. Without his early inspiration and guidance, I wouldn't be here on this floor speaking to you tonight. There's not a single individual in this world, outside of my mother, who had more of an impact on my life than the man we're here to celebrate tonight. And I thank him, and I thank you for gathering as we commemorate his wonderful life and his legacy. And at this time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, as much time as she may use.
Thank you so much for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to rise today to thank my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus for organizing this special order hour and for honoring the life and legacy of the late, great Reverend Jackson Sr., a man who truly taught us all how to keep hope alive. Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. is not only a friend to the Congressional Black Caucus, but he was a friend of all of ours, individually and collectively. He had a very humble birth, born to a single mother, and started his political life by being arrested for protesting around not being admitted to a segregated library, and became one of the storied Greenville 8 in that protest. And of course, you'll hear from others tonight about his association with the late, great Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., his leadership in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, his founder of Rainbow Push, his negotiating the release of American hostages in various parts of the world, his running for the President of the United States, both in 1984 and 1988. But you know what? I lived 90 miles from Chicago. And so I know the Reverend Jackson, who would just show up at random, unknown people's grandmother's funeral. I knew the Reverend Jackson, who showed up in Milwaukee long before I was elected to anything, as I stand here in Congress today. As I looked through all of my photographs, I saw pictures of Reverend Jackson in Milwaukee, working with local leadership in the NAACP around open housing in Milwaukee. As I looked through those photos, I saw pictures of me as a state representative, a newly elected member to the Wisconsin Assembly, as our city went through the horror of Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial murderer that killed Black men in our community. And as Reverend Jackson was there hugging family members of those victims, praying with them and offering them his clerical, his clergy support. As I looked through my pictures, I saw photos of Reverend Jackson coming to help us get out the vote continuously year after year in our very, very, very purple state. I saw with my own eyes the Reverend Jackson comforting the victim, a victim of police brutality, the murder of Dontre Hamilton, coming there to support us in the protest and to comfort the mother of this victim, an unarmed black man lying on a park bench, found himself dead at the hand of a police. And I saw one of the most remarkable things that I was able to experience was when we went to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Y'all remember Kyle Rittenhouse? Do y'all remember how Kyle Rittenhouse was being lifted up as some sort of hero by white vigilantes, even some of those white vigilantes that are here serving as public figures in Washington, D.C.? Not to mention any names, Mr. Speaker. But Reverend Jackson, sitting there plotting and planning with the clergy in Kenosha, with community-based organizations to form an alternative activity to provide COVID tests to people, to organize a festive atmosphere with balloons for the children and food vendors, all in response to the counter programming that was intended to rile up the black community. Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., I got a chance to just witness up close and personal the behind the scene brilliance. I'd seen the upfront brilliance, but this was the behind the scene brilliance that I was able to see. Reverend Jackson implored us to believe in the mantra that I am somebody, and urged us to keep hope alive. And let me say in closing, Mr. Speaker, that, Reverend Jackson probably understood better than any of us that the mission is enduring, that no one life of anyone could be the be-all. He has passed the baton now. He's the one who carried it with dignity and strength, with determination and doggedness. And I just want to close with the scripture from the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy 4:7, that as he saw the end of his life approaching, and carried on by the Holy Spirit, he wrote these words: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Reverend Jackson, Jesse, you have fought the good fight. You finished the race, and you kept the faith. And Mr. Speaker, may we all carry forth this legacy, and may we continue to keep hope alive, not just in word, but in action, for the healing of our very troubled but beloved nation at this time. And I would say now that I would like to yield back to you. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady for her comments, and at this time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield as much time as he may consume. The gentleman from Georgia, the 4th Congressional District, Mr. Hank Johnson.
Thank you, Rep. Fields, for anchoring this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour dedicated to extolling the virtues of the late Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, Jr. Today I rise to honor a giant of American history, Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, Sr., a man whose life was a testament to courage, conviction, and an unshakable faith in justice. Reverend Jackson did not merely witness history, he made history. He shaped history. He stood in the trenches of the civil rights movement, marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and devoted his life to expanding opportunity for those too often pushed to the margins of this nation. For so many of us, Reverend Jackson was more than a leader. He was a trailblazer. He showed generations of Black elected officials, activists, clergy, and public servants that our voices, our communities, and our fight for justice matter. Yes, I am somebody. His life and work helped make the very spaces we now occupy possible. Because of his leadership, sacrifice, and moral clarity, many of us found the courage to step forward in service to mankind. His impact was not only national and international, his impact was deeply personal. He was a handsome man, the embodiment of youth, a great big, full afro, mutton chop, sideburns, wearing a dashiki proudly and courageously proclaiming, "I am somebody." He challenged us to believe that we are somebody, that our people are worthy, and that progress requires both faith and action. And he challenged us to keep hope alive. That message has shaped lives, careers, and callings across this country, including my own. Reverend Jesse Jackson leaves behind more than a legacy. He leaves behind a charge to keep marching, keep speaking, keep organizing, and keep believing in the promise of America, even when America falls short. May we honor him not only with our words, but with our work. Our hearts remain with his loved ones, including our colleague, Congressman Jonathan Jackson. May he rest in peace, and may his legacy live on forever in every person he inspired. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Thank you, Jesse.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia for those words. Now I would like to yield as much time as he may consume. The gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Almo.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor a giant of the civil rights movement, Reverend Jesse Jackson. A man who understood that the success of any individual or community is interwoven like threads in a rainbow quilt. A man who dedicated his life to lifting up the least among us. A man who reminded us that our nation is only as strong as its promise to every child, every family, to every community. From walking alongside Dr. King to his time in public service and the enduring legacy of the Rainbow Push Coalition, Reverend Jackson showed us that racial justice and economic justice are inseparable, and that true equality requires both. He believed that hope is not a sentiment, but a call to action. He knew that the work of building a more just and inclusive America is never finished. As a college student, I remember watching his '88 convention speech and being moved, seeing an image of someone who looked like me at the highest stage, saying that the feeling of this nation could be compelled by action driven by hope. And that message, to keep hope alive, is why I'm standing here right now. The feeling of hope, which also happens to be the motto of the great state of Rhode Island, is something that has been the center of my service, and I'm so honored to be recognizing someone who inspired it. And so now it is on us to carry forward his legacy, to ensure that the Rainbow Coalition can continue, and that we keep the promise of America for every child, no matter their race, their zip code, or where their family is from. And I'm so honored that I get to serve with a big part of Reverend Jackson's legacy, his son, Jonathan, my dear colleague. Reverend Jackson, you were deeply missed. Your mission lives on, however, in each one of us. And we will carry it forward with courage, with justice, and yes, of course, hope. Rest in power. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for those words. Mr. Speaker, at this time I would like to yield as much time as he may consume. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Wesley Bell.
Thank you. Tonight I want to begin by talking about what it meant to be black in America before Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. The message this country sent to black children, whether they grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, or in St. Louis, was simple. You are not enough to lead, not enough to run, certainly not enough to win. Jesse Jackson spent his entire life dismantling that lie. That message didn't start with any one person. It was written into the founding documents of this country. It survived a civil war, it survived Reconstruction, and by the time the civil rights movement had finally forced America to live up to its own words on paper, the right to vote, the right to sit anywhere in this country, the right to walk through the front door, there was still something left untouched, something deeper. The belief planted in generation after generation of black children that the rooms behind those doors weren't really meant for them. Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. walked into that breach, and he didn't just march, he ran. In 1984, kids across this country, I was one of them, were watching a black man on television, not appealing to anyone's conscience, not asking for inclusion, but running for President of the United States, winning delegates, walking onto that convention floor and demanding to be taken seriously. Jesse Jackson Sr. understood something that a lot of people still haven't caught up to. The vote and the dollar have to move together. You cannot march your way to dignity if the political system keeps finding new ways to lock you out. He didn't wait for the party to make room. He built the room for himself, ran twice for the highest office in the land, and forced a reckoning with who this democracy was actually supposed to serve. You cannot draw a straight line to Barack Obama, to Kamala Harris, or even to me without acknowledging the impact and legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson. We are standing in this chamber today because of that work, every single one of us. So the question he leaves us with isn't how do we remember him, it's whether we're still building what he started. Because the work, as any of us in this room can plainly see, is not finished. So I will conclude with this. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. I yield back to the representative.
I want to thank the gentleman from Missouri for his comments, and we really appreciate the comments about Reverend Jackson. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield as much time as he may consume. A gentleman from Texas, a newly elected member of this House, Mr. Menifee.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative Fields and Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor a freedom fighter, a legend in this country, my Omega brother, the late Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr. This is an icon who marched with Dr. King, who helped lead the Poor People's Campaign for Economic Justice and to end an unjust war. An icon who ran for president and changed what this country believed was possible. And he registered millions of voters who had never seen themselves in this democracy that we also hold dear. He built the Rainbow Push Coalition to prove that our differences are our strength. Black, brown, white, indigenous, immigrant. He believed we rise together or we do not rise at all. Reverend Jackson was a truth teller, and the ills that he spoke to still demand an answer today. Courts still, to this day, strike down voting laws that target Black Americans with what one federal court called almost surgical precision. Black women still, to this day, die in childbirth at rates that shame this nation. The racial wealth gap still, to this day, robs entire communities of the opportunity that the late Reverend Jackson fought his entire life to deliver. Those battles are not behind us. They're right here. They're in this chamber, they're in our districts, and they're in the choices that we make every single day that we serve. We carry Reverend Jackson's legacy forward by engaging in those battles, by being a voice for those who have been made to feel like they're voiceless. We're gonna be all right, but not by accident, not without work. Reverend Jackson did that work for 6 decades. Now it is on us. Rest in peace, Brother Jackson, and it's the honor of my life to follow in your footsteps of fighting every single day alongside your son, my colleague, Jonathan Jackson. Rest in peace, brother. I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman for Texas, thank him for his comments. I want to thank all the members of the CBC. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2025, the Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, for 30 minutes.
The very Reverend Jesse Jackson, presidential candidate and civil rights leader, was not only my close friend and confidant, he was my longtime political ally and mentor. Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr. was my idol and spiritual and political leader. He was a brilliant and gifted and courageous civil rights leader who inspired millions. He registered millions to vote and challenged and changed the Democratic Party. On his background, just a little bit, I want you to know that Reverend Jackson, at 30 years old, was one of the youngest followers of the Dr. Martin Luther King. Reverend Jackson spent his life continuing to protect and save the gains that were made during the civil rights movement. Now, I became a dedicated and committed follower of Jesse Jackson. I worked with Reverend Jackson in both the 1984 and the 1988 presidential campaigns. I was a top advisor on the national campaign when was appointed by Reverend Jackson to chair and lead the California campaign. You know, I hear a lot said about Reverend Jackson, and most people knew him from, television, radio, and his public speeches, but I was a close-up witness to Reverend Jackson's brilliant campaign strategies and developments. He used his voice and his organizing skills to create the beautiful Rainbow Coalition, long before there was any understanding or appreciation for diversity, equity, and inclusion for all intents and purposes. Reverend Jackson made sure that the campaign that he headed included Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, whites, women, LGBTQ, organized labor, and others. He brought together pastors, preachers, and multi-faith leaders from all over the country. And I recall his work and his outreach to small farmers in rural areas. Jesse Jackson went into areas in rural America where those who did not know him hated him and thought for some reason he could be of no use to them. But once he got into those communities and started to work with the rural farmers, and many of them were having their farms foreclosed on at that time. And Reverend Jackson learned a lot about how to talk with bankers, about loan modifications so that those farmers could stay in business. And even today, there are farmers and their families who remember what Reverend Jackson did to them in these rural communities. It was amazing kind of development and association that he made. He was responsible for cracking open the doors of America's corporate community and those in Silicon Valley. Reverend Jackson was also an international ambassador for peace. He used his tremendous influence to champion human rights. I worked with him in the Free South Africa movement, where he helped free Nelson Mandela and bring an end to apartheid in South Africa. We had a wonderful experience of attending the inauguration when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa. And of course, Reverend Jackson helped to secure the release of U.S. hostages all around the world. But the one that stands out to me is when he went to Syria and negotiated the release of U.S. Navy Lieutenant Robert Goodman, Jr. Reverend Jackson was an extraordinary human being and a truly human rights advocate. I can recall when we went to public housing projects. In Los Angeles, he was at Nickerson Gardens housing projects where the gangbangers and others met him for the first time. And when he went to Nickerson Gardens, they were not believers. They didn't know an awful lot. And so they challenged him to stay overnight in public housing at Nickerson Gardens. And he did. And right now, when you go to Nickerson Gardens, some of those older members who remembered him from when he came to Nickerson Gardens will point to the unit where Reverend Jackson slept in Nickerson Gardens housing project. But that's not enough. You saw Congressman Cleo Fields here tonight. I want you to know when Katrina happened, Reverend Jackson organized me and some others. We went to New Orleans where Cleo Fields rented a bus. We got on that bus and we traveled all over New Orleans. Why did we do that? Because there were people who had been left on rooftops with no way to get down. And some of them were helped down by Reverend Jackson and Cleo Fields and myself. And many of them had been dropped along the wayside, hoping somebody would come and pick them up. I can recall when we went to the Louis Armstrong Airport, where there were people who were sitting there that had been dropped off because they had been helped to get off a roof, but no one could help them any further. We put them in that bus, and we rode through all of New Orleans, particularly in the areas around Alexandria and other cities in the Louisiana area. And so we took them to safe houses. We took them to rescue places. We took them wherever we could find a place for them to sleep. Reverend Jackson was a huge political individual at that time, recognized all over the world for his advocacy for the least of these, helping to get people to understand that everybody was special, everybody was important. And he taught that message through his brilliant way of connecting. I am somebody. Made little young boys and girls who really didn't think they were somebody, made them think now that they met Jesse Jackson that they were somebody. I want you to know that his humanitarianism was the likes of which I'd never seen before. He truly cared about people. And the Reverend Jesse Jackson was a religious man. And he prayed before meetings, he prayed after meetings, and even though at the time that I started working with him, I did not know a lot about the power of prayer, but I learned that being on the road with him and how he cared about everybody, how he cared about the young and the old and the veterans and the imprisoned, on and on and on. He was truly an unusual human being, married to an unusual woman. His wife was not only in her own right a civil rights activist and leader, but she supported him in every way that she possibly could, and the two of them raised 5 brilliant children, one of which served in this house, and that was Jesse Jackson Jr., and today we have the brilliant young Jonathan Jackson who's serving. They come with the spirit of their daddy. I live with the spirit of Reverend Jesse Jackson. It is in me. And so you can call it whatever you want to call it. You can call it progressive, you can call it liberal, you can call it whatever you want. But in the final analysis, it's Reverend Jesse Jackson who changed so many lives, who helped people to understand that they did not stand alone, that he was there for them, speaking for them, and whether he was talking to kings and queens or he was talking to the man on the block. We could count on Reverend Jesse Jackson. And in the final analysis, Reverend Jackson more than earned his place in history, and rightfully so. His work will never be forgotten and will be taught in communities all over the world, in places low and high, in our schools and universities. And I will live the rest of my life with the memories I will cherish for the time, the effort, and the phenomenal work that I experienced with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr., President, candidate, and civil rights leader. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here this evening, and I yield time to the representative from Illinois, Ms. Kelly Jackson.
Thank you, my colleague. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of the late Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jackson, as you know, was a global civil rights leader and a moral voice for our nation. I'm proud to have called the Reverend a friend, a supporter, and most of all, my constituent. No matter where the fight for justice took him, Reverend Jackson always returned home to the South Side of Chicago. From being a leader alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to a 2-time presidential candidate, Reverend Jackson was already a giant in civil rights, but he never forgot to leave the door open for Black people and, frankly, any people following in his footsteps. In 2002, when I was challenging a 10-year incumbent to become a state legislator, the first time I've ever ran, Reverend Jackson supported me. He was a hero, a behemoth of a freedom fighter, and he decided to support a newbie, an underdog, someone who was counted out like me. Time and time again, Reverend Jackson showed his support. He was large on the global stage, but he never forgot us Southsiders. He founded Rainbow Push, which continues to empower countless people across Illinois and in my district, the 2nd District. Reverend Jackson was a renowned world leader, but he never forgot how to be a friend. Over 2 years ago, when my husband died, he, even though he was not in good health, came to my husband's funeral, and he also came to the burial. It meant the world to me, and I will never, ever forget his kindness. In turn, I so appreciate that his family allowed me to be at his bedside at the hospital 6 to 8 weeks before he died to visit him. Even though Reverend Jackson is gone, his legacy is not. I stand on his shoulders alongside my colleagues who continue his fight for equality, justice, and freedom. And we do have to remember that we are somebody and to keep hope alive. I yield back.
If we have no other speakers at this moment, I would like to just, Mr. Clyburn is here. And so instead of taking more time at the microphone, I'd like to ask Mr. Clyburn to please come forward. Thank you. Mr. Clyburn, I would like to yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Under Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2025, the chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn, for 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I inquire as to how much time remains?
Gentleman has 30 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor and pay homage to the late Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, Sr. On Tuesday, February 14th, 2026, I joined the nation in mourning the passing of one of the most quintessential civil rights leaders, Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, Sr. Our relationship began as students at rival high schools in South Carolina. He at Sterling and Greenville, and me at Mather Academy in Camden. Our schools played football and basketball against each other. Jesse was a star quarterback at Sterling, and I was a prolific bench warmer at Mather Academy. But the rivalry was there and real. We could play, he could play, and I could yell. That relationship was extended and intensified when he enrolled at North Carolina A&T in the 1890 land-grant HBCU in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was already attending South Carolina State, the 1890 HBCU in our home state. There was and still is an intense rivalry between those two iconic institutions. But then, independent of each other, we both pledged and became members of Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And it was in that brotherhood and during our political activism, although not always in the same camp, that we developed a love and respect that lasted throughout the ages. His mother, Helen, was one of my biggest political boosters and a valued friend. Jess and I had a genuine friendship, in large measure because our mothers willed it to be. During my political visits to Greenville and the Piedmont area, his mother, Helen, and her good friend, Lotta Gibson, would make sure I had as much sustenance that their Southern fried chicken could provide. I shall never forget the night I kicked off my campaign for South Carolina's Secretary of State in Georgetown, every bit of a 4-hour drive from Greenville. Just as that rally began, I looked up, and who was walking through the door of that church? Helen Jackson and Lottie Gibson. They had driven all the way from Greenville down to Georgetown to help me in that effort. I lost that race, and as one can imagine, with that loss came some anxieties about the future. But as fate would have it, I was destined to serve here in Congress and eventually with two of Helen's grandsons, Jesse Jr. and Jonathan, Jesse's sons. And today, some of our children have become friends. Ours was a friendship that spanned 4 generations. Jesse was a son of Greenville, born to a mother who was just 16 years old at the time of his birth. His grandmother raised him until he was 13, when he was adopted by his stepfather, Charles Jackson. Jesse began his activism in the summer of 1960 as a student seeking to desegregate the Greenville Public Library. Jesse recounted how painful it was to not be allowed access to the books in that library. And after being denied that privilege, Jesse vowed to return that summer to advocate for the library's desegregation. He became a leader in the sit-in movement. Jesse led 7 black high school students into the whites-only Greenville Public Library. They were arrested for sitting down in that library and became known as the Greenville 8. Interestingly, around that same time, I became one of the leaders of a sit-in in Orangeburg, and some refer to us as the Orangeburg 7. It's interesting how all of this happened during that time. There was the Greensboro 4 up in North Carolina and the Friendship 9 in Rock Hill. I don't know why they gave us those kind of monikers, but we wore them with pride. The Greenville 8 ultimately won the right to have access to that library. Today, the Greenville Public Library serves all people, and that episode launched what will become for Jesse a life of civil rights and political activism. He became director of Operation Breadbasket and the founder of the Venerable Rainbow Push Coalition, an intergenerational movement to uplift the voiceless and downtrodden. His passion to bring together people of all colors and creeds is a testament to his vision of unity and oneness, as proclaimed by our nation's motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Operation Push became renowned for using direct action, selective buying, and creative negotiations to encourage major corporations to be more inclusive, hire more black executives, and support and contract with black-owned businesses and corporations. The Rainbow Push Coalition was and still is about dignity, fairness, justice, and hope. As I might say, Jesse worked to make the greatnesses of this country accessible and affordable for all. Jesse's historic presidential runs in 1984 and 1988 were reflective of his strong will, guiding faith, and belief in possibilities. Those two presidential campaigns came up short, but that didn't stop him. Because of Jesse's efforts, an end was brought to the winner-take-all distribution of delegates, a creative device comparable to those that were prevalent post-Reconstruction. Where is the fairness when the candidate who gets 51% of the votes receives 100% of the delegates? Despite what may be said to the contrary, it is a fact that this change allowed underdogs and non-wealthy candidates to compete, increased voter diversity, and paved the way for future candidates. Were it not for the proportional voting in our primaries, made possible because of Jesse's efforts, Barack Obama would not have received our party's nomination and would not have been elected our 44th president of these United States of America. Jesse's efforts were not in vain. A life lived defying odds. Reverend Jackson showed us that if we remain focused, work hard, and united in our purpose, we can continue bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice and continuing our pursuit of a more perfect union. Operation Breadbasket, anti-apartheid activism, voter registration, and corporate diversity were among just a few of his initiatives that advanced opportunity and equality for Black Americans. It should not be lost on any of us that the impact that Jesse had on the nation and the world was great. His visionary leadership is his legacy, and his orations continue to inspire all of us as we continue our pursuit of justice and equality. In 3 months, we will be celebrating the 250th anniversary of this country's existence. I quote from Thomas Paine's famous writing, The American Crisis, published in 1776 during the American Revolution. Paine wrote, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and sunshine patriot wield in this crisis strength from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph." Jesse Louis Jackson was not a summer soldier. He was not a sunshine patriot. He stood with the times. And because of his efforts, many of us can stand where we stand today. Jesse endured setbacks, losses, and the scrutiny of those who did not believe in him. But still, Jesse taught us to renew our faith in what is possible. My favorite Old Testament scripture is Micah 6:8. For he has shown thee, O man, that which is required, to do justly, be merciful, and walk humbly. In the late 1970s and 1980s, when this country grew weary of justice, it was Jesse that led us to keep walking humbly and maintaining hope. Jesse believed and internalized the admonition found in Hebrew, the 11th chapter, of James, in the 2nd chapter, faith without works is dead. Jesse's voice calls on each of us to keep that faith as enunciated in the book of Hebrew, the 11th chapter, first verse. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. Jesse understood that we must find the strength to fight for a more perfect union and find the compassion to make it universal. On March 2nd, 2026, the late Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson returned home to South Carolina to lie in state in the South Carolina state capitol. I had the honor of paying homage to him that day, and hundreds filed past his casket to pay respects. Jesse's efforts in the place he called home never wavered. In 2015, he came home to advocate for the removal of the Confederate battle flag from the South Carolina State House grounds after 9 black worshipers were killed at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston by a young white supremacist who worshiped that flag and wanted his act to start a race war. His quote, Jesse became the second black person to lie in state in our state's capital. The first was his and my friend, the late pastor and state Senator Clementa Pinckney, who was one of those Emanuel 9. So I'm pleased to be here this evening and to be part of this Congressional Black Caucus special order, and I thank my good friend for allowing me to be here. Cleo, my classmate from 1993, thank you for allowing me to be here. And I close by thanking Jesse's family, Jonathan, and for what they mean to me and my family. It is an emotional connection, not easy to explain. In his 1984 Rainbow Coalition speech, Jesse said, no matter how difficult the days and dark the nights, there is a brighter side somewhere in Angola, Mozambique, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Greenville, and Harlem. There's a brighter side. The impact of his enduring legacy will resonate for years to come. May he take his rightful place among those who have shaped this nation's course and pushed us further toward a more perfect union. And I yield back.
A moment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Suspend for a moment. Still recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to Congressman Al Green.
And still I rise, Mr. Speaker, and I rise tonight to thank the Honorable Jim Clyburn for that fantastic recitation that he accorded us. It was a walk down memory lane. But I also am honored to be in the presence of the Honorable Jonathan Jackson, and I thank him for his presence and for the many things that he and his family have contributed to the growth of our nation. I would also thank Cleo Fields, who gave birth to the notion that we should have such an event tonight. All of these persons and many more have made this possible. While I will be terse and laconic, pithy and concise, I will assure you that I won't say all that I would like to say. But I do want to remind people that the thing that caused Reverend Jackson to be set apart from his contemporaries, yes, he was a brilliant man, and his ability to speak in sound bites was just remarkable. Yes, he had the ability to organize and mobilize huge numbers of people. But the thing that really caused him to be someone very special and exemplar was the fact that he had courage. It was courage. It took the courage that he learned as he sat with Dr. King and understood the civil rights movement from Genesis to Revelations. He understood what the movement was all about. And as such, he understood that the movement had to metamorphose from civil rights to silver rights. And he, quite frankly, was the person who pushed the movement from not just taking care of people who needed housing and who needed a living wage, people who needed health care. All of these issues he still embraced. But he also brought in a new element, and that element to the equation was the civil rights movement. He knew that we had not been treated fairly when it came to integrating the various places that we would want to rest and dine. He knew that. But he also knew something else, that we had to integrate more than people and more than places. He knew that if we had to integrate the money, that's where the civil rights movement had its genesis with him. So I want to say more, but the Honorable Yvette Clarke waits, and I have the good sense to know when to yield to the better person. So, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for according me this opportunity, Mr. Clyburn. I don't know what Congress would be without Jim Clyburn. It wouldn't be the same. You are the C in Congress, Clyburn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate those comments. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield now to the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Ms. Yvette Clarke of New York, Brooklyn.
I thank the gentleman from South Carolina for his leadership and for yielding time to me. And I want to also thank Congressman Cleo Fields, who is an anchor of this evening's Congressional Caucus Special Order Hour. Good evening. I am Representative Yvette D. Clarke, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, proudly representing New York's 9th Congressional District. And I rise tonight with my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus to honor the enduring legacy of the late Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, Sr. Today, we reaffirm our deep gratitude for his extraordinary contributions to American democracy and global human rights. For more than a century, Reverend Jackson stood on the front lines of the movement for justice,
equality, and human dignity. From marching alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement to building institutions that empowered millions, his life's work helped move our nation closer to its founding ideals. Through the founding of Operation Push and later the Rainbow Coalition, he built one of the most influential social justice movements in modern American history. In 1984, Reverend Jackson broke barriers, running for the Democratic presidential nomination and becoming the first African American to run and win in statewide primaries and caucuses, garnering over 3 million votes. Through his historic presidential campaigns and decades of organizing, Reverend Jackson helped break open doors for Black political power in this nation, expanding the electorate, building multiracial coalitions, and paving the way for a new generation of Black elected leaders. Many of us serving in Congress today walk paths that Reverend Jackson helped clear. He challenged America to live up to its highest ideals, pushed leaders to act with courage, and reminded the nation that democracy works best when it works for everyone. The Congressional Black Caucus honors his extraordinary contributions to this nation and to humanity. His life stands as a testament to faith in action, courage in the face of adversity, and an unshakable belief in the power of people coming together to build a more just society. At a time when the powers that be seek to take our community backward, Reverend Jackson's leadership, moral clarity, and dedication to justice will be greatly missed. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back to the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I inquired how much more time?
Has 4 minutes left.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 3 of those minutes to my good friend, the gentleman from New York, Gregory Meeks, whose roots are in South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Clyburn, for the opportunity. Thank you, Brother Fields. And thank you for the young man here who has Jesse Jackson's DNA in him, Jonathan Jackson. I stand here today as a member of the United States House of Representatives. I'm only here because of a man by the name of Jesse Jackson Jr., who in 1984, running for president, I had recently gotten out of law school, had not really been involved in a whole lot of politics at that time. But there's a campaign that he came into New York, and he met with a group of people there. I happened to be there. And he wanted young people involved in this campaign. And I was given the opportunity to get involved in this campaign and bring him to a little place in New York called Far Rockaway, New York, where people who had never voted before came out to see him, particularly young people. Inspiration and getting informed on the communities in which they live to make a difference and making themselves feel proud. I will never forget at that rally, there was a lot of young people, and he used his words, I am somebody. You are somebody. He said, you are somebody. And he was talking to some young folks. He said, up with hope, down with dope, because you are somebody. He then talked about the unity. He said, black, brown, red, yellow, or white, we are all precious in God's sight. And that if your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. And I looked at the young people that was in that audience, and he had them all standing up. And some of them in Far Rockaway had never been to Manhattan in New York. Just some 12 miles away, you can see the New York skyline. But he inspired these young people. And for days thereafter, they were telling everybody, I am somebody. This is a man that knew how to bring out the best in everyone and bringing us all together and teaching us how to make this land a better place, making the sacrifices to make America, America. Jesse Louis Jackson, he's a man that when we look at American history, when the cameras of history, what they have recorded, and how so many people then turned out in the city of New York, for example, because David Norman Dinkins would have never been the mayor, the first black mayor in the city of New York, if it wasn't for 1984 and 1988 and the spirit of Jesse Jackson. I close by just saying this. I thank God for the opportunity to have lived in the life and times and have Jesse Jackson then come and endorse my first candidacy for the United States House of Representatives. He was one of the very first with no one else, because he never forgot me working with him in '84. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to speak and give tribute to one of the greatest men that this planet has ever seen. And I yield back to the gentleman.
I thank my friend for yielding back the time. Mr. Speaker, the time has expired? Well, let me just close, Mr. Speaker, if I may, by thanking the organizers of this and thank Cleo, Jonathan, and just say that I do believe you've heard from my colleagues tonight about one of America's best products. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. For purposes, the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker,
For what purposes, the gentleman seek recognition.
I ask that the House do now adjourn.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.